have been listening to a lot of speakers. The very last time we had Professor Ray discussing with us the EV revolution happening in India, and a lot of other speakers who have been talking about different fields economics, political economy, health. But today we have someone very interesting with us who will be discussing banking sector with all of us. And for students of economics, this stands to be a very interesting and dynamic field where each one of us is aiming to be in through various routes, of course. Some would be aiming for RBI exams, some would be aiming for UPSC, some of you would be aiming for private sector placements. But I think for each one of us, this session is going to be very insightful. Before we move on with the keynote speaker, I would request our chair for the day, Professor Reddy, to first address the audience.
So as a part of our fortnightly seminar, and every week we used to introduce very distinguished personalities to share their insights and experiences in the area of working. And today we have a very distinguished personality, Satish Marathe, and to think about his contributions and different roles he played in Indian banking and particularly uh, and also different aspects related to the cooperative sector. And he started his career, Marathe started his career in the Bank of India. Later, of course, he rose to the chairman and director of United Traditional Bank, India Limited. Currently, he is on the different boards. But one of the very important aspects to be mentioned is that he is on the he is a director on the Central Board of Reserve Bank of India. Of course, he's also there on the director of National Housing Bank and of the Government of India. And he's also appointed as expert committee to study on relevance of liquidity and retention of three-tier short-term cooperative credit structure. He's also appointed as national committee for drafting new cooperative policy. And of course, there are and so on and so forth. I will start reading meetings. I will take more time than giving more time to start to share his thoughts and insights with the audience. So today, we're happy to invite you, sir, and please forward to your design your insights and experiences from different fields that you are got. I invite you to share your thoughts. Thank you.
See, Satish Marathe has an extensive work in cooperative sector, and along with banking, he has started his own research forums for cooperatives. And one thing about him is that he has been representing the cooperative sector in pre-budget meetings with the finance minister. And in 2015, IFCO conferred Sahakarita Ratna Award on Sri Satish Marathe sir, and is the only recipient of the award from Maharashtra state.
Friends, at the outset, I thank the Institute for giving me an opportunity to meet all of you and share some of the thoughts on the current scenario of Indian banking in particular and the challenges that the sector faces today. You all must have heard the word VUCA. It's not new. It first got coined in 2008 when we went through the global financial crisis. As you know, VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And the whole world today, not only India, is passing through this phase once again. First, it was the COVID, which has shattered all economies across the globe. And the global growth rate has been one of the lowest in last few years. We had expected it to pick up from this year, that is 23-24. But then the war in the Middle East, I thought we have adjusted to that and moved ahead. But then now the attacks on the ships in the Red Sea. So things have not stabilized at all. And it is affecting every country in the world. There is no country which is which can say boldly that we are not affected. And that's why when I speak on the current scenario, I always start with this VUCA word. And let us not forget that we are not out of it yet. We don't know because what is going to crop up tomorrow. The geopolitical situation remains uncertain in different parts, and that is going to affect the world trade, supply lines, and consequently the economic activity in various countries. And as I first mentioned, that India has been affected also to a great extent by this uncertainty, complexity equally of the issues. But despite this, we have emerged as the fastest growing economy amongst the large economies of the world. We are growing faster than China, and of course, all West Europe and also US. So, of course, the size is different both for China and US, but their growth rates have tapered. And about China, we do not know what exactly and how exactly the situation will emerge because what we read in media, what we get as reports from international bodies, they do not inspire confidence at all. And US, we are getting conflicting signals all throughout. But then it has been doing well. Though the inflation has not come down, things have far better than many other countries. Before I start about banking, let me briefly share with you some of the salient features of the Indian economy today. Our current account deficit, which was always a cause of concern for years, consistently for last few years, is at a very low level, and currently for December quarter ending, it is less than 1%. Despite we continue to pay higher prices for crude and we continue to import a lot of gold which has huge consumption in our country and certain electronic items basically. Yet the current account deficit is less than 1%. That is something very important for us. As far as the fiscal consolidation, we are on the path that was declared, and I believe this year, when the figures finally will come out, not in March, but it will almost takes almost 4 to 5 months later, we would be doing much better on the fiscal consolidation, and we are on the right track to bring down our fiscal deficit also. All major sectors of the economy are doing well, and because when we meet every week for the Central Committee meeting of the Reserve Bank of India, all the parameters of the major we monitor at Reserve Bank, 21 parameters are monitored, and on all parameters we are doing extremely well. I would also like to mention that the capacity utilization of our industry is plus 70% today. And perhaps that is the reason why we see a lot of public issues on the Bombay stock market and the NSE for raising capital by the corporates. It's not only the small and medium enterprises that are raising capital, but huge capital has been raised consistently by large corporates during this year. It should also be noted that our deposits continue to rise with plus 10% all throughout the year, and we should be ending the year with deposit growth plus 10%. Exact figures, it's difficult to say what whether it would be 10%, 11%, or little more than 11%. But deposits are rising continuously. But for the last 2 years, particularly, the credit growth is outstripping the deposit growth. And that credit growth is somewhere around 15 to 16%. This is a very positive indication for future analysis. And if we see, it's the demand is from all sectors. So credit growth is very important, and particularly in the Indian context. If you study the flow of institutional credit and the growth rates, you'll always notice that whenever institutional credit flow has been sustained, regular, and robust, the growth rates have been here also positive. So this is one of the major reasons also. We had heard a lot of things about our agricultural situation. Let me share with you that we have something like 750 districts. And every year, something or the other, whether it is too much of rain, lot of heat wave, lot of snow, floods, at least 100 to 150 districts every year we get affected in the country. And yet, the agricultural production has never gone down. You see all the years. It may happen that at times it is paddy is more and wheat is less, or at times in some areas the oil seeds are less and the pulses are more. But on the whole, if you see, the agricultural production has seen a sustained growth all throughout these years. And the national food buffer, which we keep as for food security, the stock that we have is at least twice than what is expected to be kept as per law. So we are very comfortable on this situation, and we have been supporting several countries by exporting food grains to them because they are facing shortage. So some of the talk that at times we have is that we would face shortages and all. So at times what could happen is paddy is more, wheat is less, wheat is more, paddy is less. But on the whole, there would be no crisis. And looking to this situation itself, the government has continued to support about 80 crores of our population with highly subsidized rations. In fact, you all must have heard or read that the World Bank, IMF, and even United Nations, all these institutions, in their various reports from time to time, have said that this support during the COVID and immediately thereafter has really avoided a catastrophe. And looking to our comfortable situation, the government has thought fit to do it. Last point about the economy I would mention is inflation. The whole world is facing this challenge. Inflation is high across countries. And in our country also it is inflation has been higher than what has been mandated. In our country, we have decided we tolerate inflation at 4%, but it could be plus or minus 2%. But for last 1 year and more, it has always been more than 4% consistently. And if you ask me why, it has two components which has kept the inflation high. One is the imported component of it, which is mainly on account of our import of energy, crude, basically, where we have phenomenally paid high prices. But then, by our decision to import crude from Russia, we have managed our cost very effectively. That's very important. In fact, as our external affairs minister said, that we tamed the inflations for the crude across the globe by our decision to import from Russia, because what we import not only is consumed in India, but it gets exported to a great extent in all developing countries. And that has also been to some extent a money spinner for us. And the second component has been our certain food items. We all know tomato, onions, and potatoes. These three items play a significant part in determining the inflation. And for several reasons, the prices of these three items have been substantially going up and down all throughout the year, not only this year, even last year. Presently, it has come down a little, and with the government, particularly NAFED, undertaking now even the sale of tomatoes and onions in various parts of the country, I think this component will get substantially tamed. Oilseeds and pulses. Pulses, traditionally, we have been importing to meet our requirements. And pulses we used to import a lot from Canada. One of the, I was always curious as to why Canada has been supporting our farmers' agitation in India. You may all not know, but then what has appeared in Canadian press and in a section of our Indian press is very interesting. I'll just touch upon it in two sentences. Years back, from India went to Canada, particularly from Punjab. They purchased huge tracts of land, and the climatic conditions were good for planting pulses. And when government decided that we will not increase MSP for wheat and paddy because they consume a lot of water, lot of fertilizers go into their cultivation, and it spoils the quality of land. So we are not going to encourage both wheat and paddy, but will give more MSP to pulses. Now, the moment these pulses were going to get more subsidy, more MSP, and in a way subsidy, imports were going to get affected, and they did get affected. And then the agitation started. That is also one of the prime reasons why Canada has been talking about farmers' agitation in India and all. But that apart, pulses, the production is now increasing across, and with edible oil mission going full steam in the northeast, particularly for palm oil, in the next few years, our dependence on Malaysia and Indonesia would also come down. And this imported component in our inflation is bound to come down. Now, this is an aspect which needs to be studied further. I'm speaking from what I have read and what we get information. But all the same, our inflation is today around 5%, little more than mandated. 4% is the mandate. It's about 5%. And every year in summer season, I expect the inflation to go up again by in the next few months. But it will taper down sometime from August onwards. That's how I look at it. Giving all these background of the Indian economy, I would not talk about the banking sector. Today, Indian banking sector is in the prime of health, best in the pink of health, I would say. It has never been like this in several decades. And there are what we see, all parameters, if we analyze one by one, we can see all that. We have a big mix of banks in our country. We have 12 public sector banks, 21 private sector banks, 44 foreign banks. Of these 44, about 25 are small. They cater to the industries that come to India from their country. But about 20 large foreign banks we have. Then we have 12 set up small finance bank. They were set about 10 years back. 6 payment banks. Then we have 2 local area banks. These we have only 2 of them. One in Andhra Pradesh and one I believe was in Maharashtra. That's all. Except when they were first licensed, we had some 6 or 7, but now only 2 remain. So 2. And then in the cooperative sector or the rural sector, we can say, we have 351 district central cooperative banks. We have 34 state cooperative banks. We have, in the old days, we used to call them land mortgage banks. These banks used to extend finance for capital investment. Now these have been rechristened as rural and agricultural development banks. These banks, there are 13 state level banks and about 304 primary level land mortgage, rural and urban banks. And then we have what we call urban cooperative banks, like the ones of Cosmos, Shamrao Vittal, Saraswat. They are 1500. So this is the profile of the banking sector. The public sector banks, this number is not exact, which I am now giving you. Could be a little less, little more. But we have about 1,65,000 branches of public sector banks, about 33,000 branches of RRBs. We have, yes, in rural sector, apart from the cooperatives, we have 43 rural RRBs, regional rural banks, which were sponsored by the public sector banks in particular. They are about 33,000. And the cooperative sector banks together have something like another about 35,000 branches put together. DCCBs, UCBs, then the rural and agricultural banks, both state and primary. So in all, we have roughly 2,30,000 to 2,35,000 branches in our country of the banking sector. We have something to reach out to a large population spread across the country. And in our country, we have something like 7.5 lakh villages, just as we have 750 districts. To reach out to the last man, citizen of our country, what we started was a process of banking correspondent. And roughly we have something like 20 lakh banking correspondents across the country. Similarly, POS machines, of course, They are not much in vogue these days. In fact, their use is falling all over the country. But they also number about 20 lakhs spread all over across the country. So these are the outlets which we have. So this is the size, and this is the way they reach out to the people in our country. What figures I am giving now are the published figures for March 23, because authentic figures for this year, which will end in another 1 month's time, we should be having only by June end, because all banks will complete their statutory audit and submit their annual accounts reports to the Reserve Bank by end of June, everybody. So compilation and data should take another 1.5 month, and the RBI inspection cycle gets completed by generally November, and that is why every year the RBI publication on trends and progress of banking comes out in December every year. For those who are interested, I have a soft copy with me. I'll share with the institute, which can be shared amongst all the students for more detailed, because in limited time it's not possible to cover the entire thing. But I would like to say that for the first time we crossed 200 lakh crores of deposit in this current year, and this we achieved in a small period of 10 years. We were less than 100 crores about 10 years back, but in the last 10 years we have doubled ourselves almost as far as the mobilization of public deposits by the public sector, by the scheduled commercial banks. The CASA deposits in the overall deposits, their percentage is about 31%. Could be a little less, half a percent more or there. But then 31% has been the CASA deposits. And I expect this figure will come down as we go ahead, because most of the public sector banks used to enjoy a lot of balances in current accounts of government departments and ministries. But the new scheme that the government of India has now implemented, and now the states have also started implementing, is they release funds in bank accounts only when it is due for payment. So the float that these public sector banks used to enjoy on account of government deposits will go down as the years go ahead, and that will add to the cost of the operations of the bank. As far as advances is concerned, we have almost 143 lakh crores of credit disbursed. That is almost about 74-75%. And here I would like to share some figures with you also. Of the total credit, agriculture gets about 15.5%, just 15.5%. MSMEs get still less, it is 11.5%. Services, our IT sector and NBFCs, they get almost 20%. And retail finance gets about 21%. Now that is the breakup of, and the balance left, I have given the percentages in the overall things. Balance gets in industry, large and medium size, and for food procurement of food credit and other activities. I mentioned these figures because when I speak of challenges before us, I will be using these figures once again. For last 2 years, as I mentioned, the Indian banks have been doing extremely well. The provision coverage ratio is almost 75%. It's one of the highest in the world today. after America and Switzerland. We are probably number third in the world with such high provisioning coverage ratio for our impaired assets. And to a great extent, our gross NPAs have substantially been reduced in the last few years. For March 23, the gross NPAs were just 3.9%, and the net NPA is probably the lowest in the world or one of the lowest. It is just 0.78%. This is low NPAs on account of higher provisionings that we have made over the years. And in the last few years, after having earned profits and the government having infused capitals, it has not happened in last 2 years, but prior to that, and taking stricter action under the insolvency and bankruptcy code, recoveries have been better. In fact, they have improved substantially. And I believe after the new government that comes sometime in June, we should be having a new IBC 2. What we have, IBC 1. This IBC was challenged in multiple courts, multiple forums, but now things are settling down. What should have been over in, say, 5 months or 6 months, at maximum 1 year, has taken in the past anything between 2.5 to 3 years also. But now cases have been settled and they become benchmarks for future decisions. So we expect the IBC to give us a lot of support in the overall recovery as we go ahead. Looking to all these situations with very high provisioning coverage ratio, less NPA, naturally the capital adequacy has substantially improved. As against what we expect, a 9% capital adequacy, today it is 17% for all banks put together as an industry. This will give us to increase our lending. That should be, we would be able to leverage this capital for further growth in our sector. And looking to the, as I mentioned, the various points of the economy earlier, I believe we are poised for a long term growth. I'm not looking to just 1 or 2 years, but it could be a continuous growth if something very fundamentally doesn't change for the next decade. Next decade I'd always describe as decade of food and agro processing. As a country, processing of agricultural products in our it's very low today. While the developed countries, the processing rate is anywhere between 70 to 80%, and our in Southeast Asia, our Asian tigers, and some of the European and developed countries, where it is ranging between hovering around 60%. In our country, the processing of agricultural products is just 20%, which is very low for a country which today has achieved a situation. You name an agricultural product, and generally we would be in top three. In some cases, we could be number one, number two. It's always a race between US, China, and India. That's the position. In certain agricultural products, we are in top five. But then there is no processing of it. And what processing gets covered in our country is just 20% and a few crops: sugar, jute, oilseeds, and some other items. You will be surprised that in a large country with a huge production of fruits and vegetables, the component relating to this Of that 20%, whatever is processed is just 1.5%. And there's huge wastage that is happening today. The government of India, that's why, has been aggressively promoting food processing through formation of farmer producer organizations. They had set a target of setting up 10,000 units in about 3 years' time. And presently, I can say about December, about 7,500 units have been set up. Majority of them again in Maharashtra and Uttar Pradesh. Other states are following up, but then Maharashtra and Uttar Pradesh is ahead of us in this matter. So next few years, we'll see tremendous rise in processing of agricultural products, which will increase their shelf life. There will be price discovery of markets because processed food have shelf life, and consequently it will be released when there is demand. Consequently, the farmer will benefit. So there would be substantial investments, and a whole range of food processing activities would come up across the country. And there is no dearth of technology in our country. We have several institutes which can provide the necessary equipment, machineries, related software also, processes also to this new sector. And we have equipments which can be having prices as low as 25,000 to 5 crores. It's a huge thing. We have the technological capacities. Our units in our institutes in Hyderabad, Bhopal, Nagpur, Lucknow, even in Uttarakhand, some places, we have the institutes and the technology, and this sector is going to be one of the where we will see the maximum agro industry in the next 10 years. That is going to be very, very important. And the banks will have to be ready to finance this activity with new products and new structures also, because the existing products and existing services that the banks provide may not meet the entire requirements of this sector. Similarly, in our country, we have something like 6 crore 33 lakh MSME units. Of this MSME, let us remove the medium size. They are in fact large, and their number is also small, not more than 500 of this 6 crores 33 lakhs. But what we have a large number is what we describe as small and micro enterprises. And in small and micro enterprises, the micro number is almost 99% of the 6 crore 33 lakhs. And these MSME units are spread across both urban and rural areas. Urban areas has something like 3 crore 10 lakh units, and rural areas has something like 6 crores 20 lakhs or a little more units. 3 crores and 20 lakh units in rural areas. The requirements are very small. The Mudra loans may not be enough for them. We have three categories of Mudra loans: up to 50,000, up to 5 lakhs, and up to 10 lakhs. Not everybody would fit into this scheme. So, this small and medium enterprises, which plays a very important role in the Indian economy today, is not getting the financial support that it really deserves. Compared to China, the contribution of small and medium enterprises that they give to their industry, our contribution of small and these SMEs to Indian industry is not even 40% of what the Chinese SME units are doing. So we'll have to look to it, initiate changes not only at banking level and develop new products and new instruments for financing them, but the government will also have to change the way they support the present schemes are good by themselves but are not enough. And as we have all often heard, the if we have to release really the animal spirit in this sector, we need to do a lot. And in a country like ours, as I mentioned earlier, it is the institutional finance which is going to support this activity. No amount of private lending is going to be enough, and it's too small for our requirement. That also should be noted. So, agro processing and SME units in all sectors. It's not only in manufacturing but also in our services sector. The third sector, which is going to grow phenomenally in our country in the next few years, is the real estate or the construction activity. We talk of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, metropolitans apart from. But how many of us really know that some between 18,000 to 20,000 new urban centers are coming up across the country? And the trend of urbanization is going to be very fast. It is already at a high rate in some 8 or 10 states like Tamil Nadu, Kerala, parts of Karnataka, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Jaipur to Chandigarh, Haryana, Punjab included, Western UP, parts of between Jharkhand and West Bengal. Urbanization is very rapid, and we don't have to be worried about this. I do not subscribe to the view at all that we were always an agricultural country. We were never only an agricultural country. It's a myth that has been created over the years. The foreign rule destroyed our industry and businesses, and people who lived in large centers may not be cities like as we have today. They had nothing to fall back to earn and live. They went back to their villages. And that is why our rural population was high, our dependence on agriculture. With independence, things are getting naturally corrected. So urbanization, we shouldn't look something as a danger, that is something that is dangerous and that is changing our lifestyle and we are back to villages and all. It's sounds very, what shall I say, uh, very romantic, I would call, but then it's far from reality. Urbanization will grow and grow at a very large speed across the country in the next few years. So, construction activity is going to be another area where we will have to ensure that we provide houses to all. And if houses to all are to be provided, we will have to develop products and services for people who want to buy loan by providing housing loans, and to builders and developers at competitive rates by building new models for financing construction activity. Days are gone where cash would finance construction activity with substantially. With demonetization, we have come a long way, and there is no hope of we going back to there. Similarly, with GST coming in, very few people will be able to avoid taxes. They can't do it. And if GST is paid, income tax naturally will follow and everybody will pay. You must have seen in the last few years the income tax returns that have been filed have been continuously on the rise. And they will continue to rise because the Indian economy, with all these steps, has got substantially formalized. And with digitalization of our payment system and the QR code revolution, I call it a QR code revolution, even a small vendor today, a small sabji wala, tea stall wala, वो QR code रख देते हैं. You pay by this. And these all people who were not otherwise eligible to get credit are now becoming a part of the banking and formal financial system, and that is one of the reasons why there is huge credit demand for credit. As I mentioned, retail credit is the maximum thing that has grown in the last. The component is about 21%. And what retail finance is? Buying houses, personal loans, outstanding in credit cards, and all these categories. Why are they increasing? They are increasing only because people have their income levels have increased, and they have increased not only in urban sectors but also in the rural sectors. May not be uniform across. Orissa may have less income levels, but then certain parts of Maharashtra, Punjab, Madhya Pradesh, across the country, Karnataka, the income levels are rising, and that is one of the reasons why the retail. There was a lot of talk that banks should be careful, and the banks have undertaken stress tests on retail credit. Nowhere they have found any signs of sickness or stress. Why it is being looked as a concern is mainly because in retail finance there is either less collateral or no collateral at all, and that is why it is looked to as could be banks should be prepared to be increasing their capacity to bear the risk, and that's a signal that the Reserve Bank sent out. Please check and build up your reserves to meet expected and unexpected losses. That's the only point. Having given this you about the economy and the banking, the challenges that we have today before is we have adopted risk management as a part of life in banking system. Not all banks have been able to put at the say a very robust risk management systems. Many banks have done well. All are doing it. And while putting the risk management system in place, the Reserve Bank has advised all banks to undertake risk-based audit also now. So the entire ecosystem is being strengthened, and it is expected that nobody will be taken of us from the banking sector will be taken by surprise as we go ahead. We'll get early signals of stress, and we would take early signals to ensure and put in place risk mitigation practices. But then this is a big challenge. Market risk and credit risk is fairly identified, but then operational risk has still not been fully understood and appreciated. I remember when I was the chairman of a private sector bank almost 20 years back, I was invited with some other chairman by the Reserve Bank of India, and they said, please provide us a list of operational risks. We started in the meeting, and then we realized it's a Herculean job. So we requested, give us 8 days time, we'll come back. And we all met again after about 15 days back, and we shared our list. Common things were removed, and what ultimately remained was a list of 1400 operational risks. However, the banks and financial institutions in our country have suffered very small losses on an operational risk, mainly because people have been honest. People in the banking sector and financial system have been honest. Of course, there have been frauds here and there, but then as a system, it's not very significant. But then creating a robust early warning system with risk management ecosystem in place is one of the major challenges as I look towards the bank. The second challenge I look from the banking angle is mobilizing deposits. The banks have do not I do not think the banks have been having a steady resource mobilization policy. Even now, if you see, many banks have been resorting to short term methods to raise deposits to meet the continuous rising demand of credit. So they are going in for CPs, CDs. Some of them have increased interest rates on deposits, but the period that for which they are raising the deposits is not uniform across the country. Some banks are doing it for 12 months, some are doing it for 17 months. I don't know what is the logic of 17 months, but then some are doing it for 17 months. Some banks are doing it even for 3 years. But there doesn't seem to have evolved a very rational resource mobilization policy, and as a consequence, the interest risk will remain on the top priority. What at what rate we'll charge the borrowers and what rate we'll pay the depositors, unless we evolve. Today, you must have read in the newspapers that the government of India and Reserve Bank have asked all commercial banks, scheduled banks, to prepare their business plan for next 3 years. It is particularly this has been one of the main reasons because there's continuous heavy growth, but the resource mobilization is a challenge. And Indian financial system, when I'm talking of resource mobilization, is no longer a two-channel, three-channel financial system. We have multiple channels for people to invest their surpluses. We have banks, we have corporate bonds, we have companies raising fixed deposits, we can invest in insurance products, we can invest in forex, we can invest abroad, we can invest in government securities. It's a whole range. We can invest in shares, we can invest in mutual funds, and I listed only a few. There are many more, and there are exotic products also, AIF and all those things. A common man may not go for AIF and all, but then who are knowledgeable and know may go in for that. One time, recurring deposit scheme was used to be very popular. Every month somebody would contribute. आज आरडी में कोई पैसा नहीं रखता है, एसआईपी करते हैं म्यूचुअल फंड में. Reason being, there is both appreciation in value and return is also much higher. Even for a debt mutual fund, the return is hovering between 7 to 8%, and some of the better debt mutual funds gives you even 8.5%. जो इक्विटी में करते हैं, for them sky is the limit. जो बैलेंस करते हैं, they easily give anywhere between 14 and 15. If somebody is giving less than 14 and 15, one should think whether one should remain invested in that mutual fund or not. So the competition to deposits or raising resources, according to me, is going to be the second biggest challenge as we go ahead. The third is adoption of technology. Not all banks have been able to bring in technology, put it to maximum use, and provide services at competitive rates at the speed at which the customer expects. They have not been able to do. Many banks are doing it, but not to the expectation. Because use of technology for years together in our banking sector has been वो अकाउंटिंग मशीन जैसा यूज़ किया उन्होंने. Not many banks have used their core banking solutions to generate MIS, and you, on the basis of MIS, knowledge based decision process has also been substantially less. That is also one of the reasons why this risk mitigation or risk management has not developed the way it should have really developed. So, induction of technology, continuous upgradation, and retention of competent, committed workforce at officers and managers level. It's going to be a big challenge for the banking industry. Whether they would continue. In the old days when I was in bank, एक बैंक ज्वाइन कर दी तो ठीक है आई विल रिटायर और most of the people I didn't do that. I changed 3 banks, but then many people generally would retire from that bank unless they got something very lucrative and he was prepared to take challenges and go abroad or come to 95% remained in the same banks. अब ऐसा नहीं होने वाला है. People are hunting. All banks are hunting for good people from the banks only. And retention of competent, skilled staff, committed staff, is going to be the third biggest challenge for as I look to it. And just as we have in accountancy, particularly chartered accountants need to go a process of continuing education. They get annually the marks. Now the doctors also have to undergo continuous education. The banking sector staff, whether he is an MBA, whether he is an electronic engineer, or he is just a MA economics or MA arts, whosoever is in the managerial field will have to undergo continuous education. There is no such scheme today of continuously upgrading the skills. And as I mentioned, that is the next challenge. And the last challenge is customer expectation. The customers now expect the moon. And this is going to happen. See, when the Prime Minister announced 2 or 3 years back that a loan could be sanctioned in 59 minutes, nobody believed him. Even today, many don't believe. But let me tell you that there's serious work going on in Reserve Bank and many banks. And believe me, standard loans for SMEs, which can be analyzed on objective basis to begin with the new app that is coming. It should come in another 6 to 8 months' time. It is ready. It's being tested. An SME, an entrepreneur, could get his loan sanctioned after negotiating in 15 minutes. That is the strength of the new app that is coming. Similarly, an app is in advanced stage which has been developed, tested. It was displayed at our G20 finance track. Any farmer who has an Aadhaar card, who has a mobile, and whose land records are computerized, Revenue Department has done it, and it has been substantially done across the country. He should be getting his short-term loan or KCC loan, Kisan Credit Card loan or limit, again in 15 minutes. Now this is going to revolutionize. And the beneficiaries of all this, believe me, could be a potential figure of 35 to 40 crores of our population. Now that is the expectation boom that is going to happen. And those banks which are not up to date in technology, are not ready for change, things will be difficult. A time we have several committees in all banks. A time has come for re-engineering, to have a committee at the board and at various operational levels to have a re-engineering committee of banking operations. It's high time now. Unless we do that, we'll not be able to. Those banks which do not change with the times will not be able to sustain growth, and they may not remain very competitive as we move ahead. Now, these are the major challenges. With last few lines, I would say there exists huge opportunities in the banking sector. Initially, I gave you all the numbers of banks, how many and all. But for a country of our continental size, I believe we have far too less banks in the country. And huge amounts still remain to be tapped and brought in formal financial system. We don't have that. Huge untapped resources remain. And to do that, we'll need more banks. We'll need banks at national level, regional level, local level. We'll need banks, or the primary cooperative agricultural societies, PACs as we call them. They do both the activities of thrift and credit. If suppose we form, as in developed countries, a separate deposit insurance corporation for primary agricultural societies, which number about 1 lakh, for primary milk societies that number about 1,90,000 in the country, and about 50,000 weavers and fisheries cooperative societies put together. Just imagine the funds that we will raise in the formal financial sector. There is no dearth of resources. We are not ready structurally to move ahead. We need new banks, we need new structures. And that's why the banking industry will remain a big opportunity for one and all. To conclude, for a fifth largest economy in the world today, which we should be number 3 in another 2-3 years down the line, we need a strong, robust financial ecosystem, and banks would play the major role. And I believe the government, the Reserve Bank of India, the Ministry of Finance, all are engaged with this topic. And as we go ahead, things will move faster and better. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was a wonderful talk. It's touched upon many aspects of not only general economy, that looking at inflation, its determinants. Also touched upon many aspects of banking, including different challenges. Now I think the floor is open for a few questions. Yeah.
Hello, sir. Sir, you mentioned urbanization, how it is good for the economy and how we need more urban cities, right? Urban centers. But what about the environmental aspect and the negatives of urbanization?
See, years back,
Because,
I'll,
sorry to
I'll, I'll
yeah,
respond to you. No. See, unfortunately, in our country, we have not thought of planned cities. That is the whole trouble today. Years back, I remember there was a deputy municipal commissioner in Mumbai, and there used to be always talk of TDR कितना देना है, फ्लोर्स FSI कितना कंस्ट्रक्शन के लिए मुंबई में देना है, मुंबई में देना है. This used to be talked. He says it's not about concessions. It is about putting in place a policy which will take care of all what the concerns are. whether it is sanitation, whether it is roads, whether it is supply of good quality water, whether it is location of industry, pollution treatment plants. He wrote a wonderful article. Now the planners are fairly engaged with this aspect. And whether you like it or not, as I mentioned, cities are new townships are coming up across the countries. So for us, as a public policy, we need to put in place an integrated policy for development of urban centers. That should solve your problem.
Yeah, but in order to improve the growth, we need more urban centers, right?
We need.
We need more urban centers.
No, I'm not saying.
That's what you mentioned.
I'm not saying that. They are already coming up. I'm not creating centers, or anybody is deliberately creating centers. But then they are already coming up, because even today, people who come to urban centers get some job or the other and make a livelihood. So these centers are also engines of growth. And so long as we are not able to generate enough income earning opportunities, I'm not talking of employment or something, it's a very different from income earning opportunities and employment. People will continue to come to city, urban centers. Things are changing in rural India. If you look to Niti Aayog's report, the rural income from agricultural sector is just 35% now, and the non-farm income generated in rural sector is about 65%. So things are also changing there and income levels are increasing, but then they are not as much as they are in urban centers.
Hello, sir. Thank you for a very informative and a comprehensive talk. I'm Piyush. I'm a research associate at the Center for Entrepreneurship here at the Gokhale Institute, and we are working specifically on nano entrepreneurs, which are even smaller within the micro enterprises that you mentioned during your talk. So within that, we are currently conducting a research on how they are accessing credits using the modern fintech methods, which is cash flow based lending, account aggregators, the OCEN, Open Credit Enablement Network. And through our interactions, what we have found out, the trust in the OCEN or the whatever fintechs are, because some of them have experienced some negative experiences like fraud of UPI and some ATM pin scams or getting some wrong QR codes or those kinds of things. So RBI already has this a regulatory framework and everything. So is there any idea or any efforts to have a regulatory body similar to NPCI, which is regarding the UPI and Paytms? Is there any effort to regulate from a perspective of user experience and also onboard cooperative banks or smaller banks, which are basically in a regular connect with the small and nano enterprises?
You have two questions. So I'll. Number one, it is not now. In one of the speeches that was delivered in College of Agricultural Banking in Pune itself, the then Deputy Governor had openly called upon all banks to partner with fintechs and provide credit systematically to the to the customers who want it. See, fintechs in our country today are only aggregators, but abroad they are disaggregators also. In UK, for example, if I want a loan, maybe a small loan, I put up a request, and then the fintech circular shares it with the financial institutions, and they come out with a solution. And then I pick and choose what suits me best. This has not started happening in our country still. That is also going to happen as we go ahead. And instead of relying on fintechs not fully regulated by RBI or anybody else, many large public sector and private sector banks are themselves promoting fintechs and ensuring security and sanctity of what is being done. But it has to pick up pace. It will happen as we go ahead. And Bank of Baroda, State Bank, in a way, they are pioneers in a lot of these things. It will mature. It because anything that new comes, initially people exploit, but the effort is to have it more regulated and systematic. For cooperative banks, there is no bar on aligning with a fintech to give their services.
We need more support because their technology base is not yet ready.
No, today they'll have to tweak a little. All cooperative banks, particularly urban cooperative banks, are under core banking solution. And with a little tweaking, it is possible that they can avail the services of our fintechs. It's possible. But somebody has to do it first. A large bank has to do it first amongst these banks, and then others will follow. The large banks themselves have not done much on this score, whether it is Saraswat, Cosmos, Janta Sahkari Bank in Pune, or they have not done still. Once the large banks do, others will quickly follow.
This kind of you suggest like mutual fund. Those are mutual funds like those are AMCs. Promote mutual funds.
I am not saying promote me.
Not promote, but they are investors in mutual funds where they are doing their work like researching what kind of shares they can pick, what are the themes for their investment. Same thing you are saying when the banks uh, choose some kind of portfolio where they can promote fintech.
No, no, no. Fintech basically will bring the borrower and the lender together. That's the role we visualize today for fintechs. That's what we are anticipating. Banks have money, borrowers don't have. So they will work as a bridge in the interim today. Over a period of time, they may evolve into new activities. But today, basically bringing the borrower and the lender together.
No, but you are saying banks should promote fintech.
They are promoting themselves because they want dependable fintechs.
Yeah, that is what I'm saying. Suppose every banks have their own fintech, right?
Hmm.
So that fintech only they promote their parent bank.
See, आज ऐसे होगा, but tomorrow there could be 5 banks coming together. Now, for example, NPCI. NPCI is founded by a cluster of banks. It's not one bank. NPCI is not standalone. Likewise, fintechs can also be promoted jointly, but the banks have to take lead. Enough initiative has not happened in this area still.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to our institute. I'm Samarkand, student from MSc Economics. Quick question to you. Considering the fact that RBI is amongst the best central banks in the world, it's the way they have handled inflation or the exchange rate fluctuations, volatility, everything, it's amongst the best, and it has a vision ahead for future. So that's why it's amongst the best in the world. Similarly,
It
when we
was
talk-
recent, the governor was recently felicitated as the best governor
Exactly,
amongst
exactly.
and I don't know whether you have read yesterday for the risk mitigation and risk management practices. Again, RBI was felicitated yesterday.
Exactly, sir.
Hmm.
So that's why it feels proud to be an Indian, and that's what we feel proud of RBI. So the question was, since we will be amongst the top three economies in the world within say 2-3 more years, and RBI is playing an excellent job in that. So similarly, what things can we improve in our banking systems as well to make it more competitive globally? So if we compare central banks, India is at par with Fed Reserve or those banks. But the banking system, so how can we improve that? In say one factor would be skill set of officers, personnel. So what kind of things would be required for a new changes or adapting to that? Number one. Number two, how or what kind of policies should we implement to make it more globally competitive? Right? So how do we proceed in that direction?
See, two, three questions. So I'll give one consolidated answer. I don't know whether you will be satisfied with it, but then see, for a large country like us, and which is emerging on the world scene as one of the fastest and largest growing economies, we need very large banks. The size of our banks today is not large. And as a first step, you must have noticed in last 2 years, we consolidated our banking industry into four large banks apart from. So now we have not only State Bank and ICICI, but with State Bank, ICICI, HDFC, we have four large also banks. So 8 to 10 large banks of global size, they will emerge as we go ahead. Number and they will have one of the best global practices or best Indian practices also, because others are emulating us in many aspects today. So we should be growing into that size as a bank, number one. Number two, see, foreign banks came to India not to support India, but to support the companies from their respective countries. And I don't have the figures just now, but Indian entrepreneurs are investing in a substantial way across the globe today, including US, France, and several other countries. So, to meet the requirement of Indian entrepreneurs and investors abroad, our banks will definitely grow and meet their expect. And as we grow, we will build up enough skills and meet. See, today we have something like 100 odd branches spread across the globe. This number is small for us, but when our trade and business interests increase in different countries, our banks will grow. I don't feel any worry. I'm not worried about it. We have been doing, we went through a consolidation phase of our branches about 2 or 3 years back, and we some branches were merged, some were closed, some were taken over. Bank of some one bank's branch was taken over by another bank, and as a consequence, we reduced the number of branches by 65 in about last 2 years. So we can increase them again when the need arises. What we are now today attempting is internationalizing the rupee. That is the biggest thing which is going to change the entire system. And RuPay card, believe me, in the next 5 years will emerge as an international card. More than that, it is premature to say everything, but more than 25 countries have today approached us that they would like to trade with us in Indian rupee. We have created the procedures, allowed them to open Vostro accounts and so many things, and we would also do. But these things will take a little time to stabilize. It doesn't happen overnight. Replacing dollar is not easy, and it's not going to be necessarily, we don't have to push also. Because if suppose you push dollar, you're trying to push away dollar, whom will you bring in? Chinese yuan. We don't want to do that. So we have geopolitical interests also in mind. So we are doing it, we will do it. But first we will internationalize Indian rupee to a great extent. And rupee card in next years will also be available in UK, USA, and every country which has large Indian population. That is the target. Already it is operating in 7-8 countries. It will operate in another 15 to 20 countries in the next few years. So we'll internationalize rupee, expand our footprint abroad. Banks will follow them. Don't worry.
I hope there are no questions from there, but I have one clarification.
अरे साहब आपको मैं क्या बताऊं?
I mean, it's whatever you just said now. As you said in your talk that number of public sector bank came down from 29 to 12. As a result, of course, one of our study we're looking at whether because of this consolidation, that mode which is happening in the banking industry, as a result, the credit exposures of these banks are becoming similar to the different industries. As a result, it is posing some kind of threat to the macroeconomic aspect in terms of building up systemic risk. Is there any problem that as if the person who has seen that kind of internal risk management practices will see?
Honestly, to say, I have not come across this aspect has been has not been brought out and has not been red flagged. If it has increased because four banks have come together, the net worth has also equally increased. So, vis-a-vis their exposure to their net worth, we have limits for group exposures and individual. So, I don't think anybody has breached those limits. And so long as they operate within that single party limit or the group limit, I think we
Can
shouldn't.
be manageable.
No, it won't be a very serious matter. Of course, that's why I am saying we, as a regulator and all banks in their respective managements, are today taking proactive steps for risk management and to understand the emerging risk. A risk-based internal audit has also been initiated, which will signals at an early stage if there are any signs of stress. So I think we should be able to, unless something very different which we had not imagined, something happens, it will not be a cause of concern.